Greetings, geeks and nerds, and ladies universe, and I'm white and nerdy. Time for another YouTube poll winner, and this one came in only second to spawn the animated series, and is my last review of April, The Punisher. 20 years ago, this film came out, and a lot of you probably haven't heard of it, and it's not even recognized in some capacity. There are people who talk about it, but I think that mostly from word of mouth, people have shut this film out. It came out in 2004, during a time when Marvel superhero films were starting to become more and more popular. There were recent films like Spider-Man 2, The Fantastic Four, The Incredible Hulk the year before, and even Daredevil the year before as well too. Monumental films for Marvel is coming out, but this one is the lesser known of the bunch, and that's because it's about a very obscure Marvel anti-hero, one whose origin is kind of shrouded in mystery, but in some capacity it's one of the greatest origins in comic book history. So let's talk a little bit about Frankie and the Punisher's origin before the movie. It's weird for a company like Marvel Comics with a line of very many superheroes to create something as well and as identical as an antihero. The Punisher was created by Spider-Man writer Gary Conway, and if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because we can all be upset at him for killing a beloved Marvel character and one of Spider-Man's ex-love interests or lovers in the series. Yep, Gary Conway, the man who created the Punisher on the pages of Spider-Man, which I'll get into in a bit, is the guy that killed off Gwen Stacy. You know, Stan Lee made the creative choice of killing off Captain Stacy and then having Captain Stacy know Spider-Man is Peter Parker back in the time, because at the time, before Mary Jane was invented, Peter had a relationship with Gwen Stacy. Then Stan Lee decided, I want a love triangle to be involved, so he created Gwen Stacy. Years later, and Stan Lee even talked about this in Mutant Monsters and Marvels with Kevin Smith, that he was even upset when Gary Conway asked him to do it, and he regret telling Gary Conway, yeah, sure, you can do that. But thank God that Gwen would go on to live in infamy with appearing in Spider-Man Beyond and Across the Spider-Verse, voiced by the beautiful and talented Haley Steinfeld. So, there you go there. So, the Punisher was created by one of the most hated people at Marvel. And his origin at first was kind of different. If you want even more detailed, I will pin it in the comments down below of Linklater's first appearance with the Punisher in the pages of Spider-Man as he goes into more detail about it. I'm just going to do a quick summary over it, and by the way, I love Linklater and Lewis Love Hug, so go and support him if you can. He's been one of my icons and also favorite YouTubers and an inspiration for doing this channel. Also inspiration for me trying to do comic book reviews almost in his same style, which I guess I kind of do, so nice to him. So go over there, go see him, be nice to him. Again, I will pin where you can find the video in the comments down below. But with that all said and done, let's talk about how Gary Conway first gave us the Punisher. Gary Conway, just to let people know, was also the man that invented the Jackal, which I know a lot of people kinda hate and kinda have a love-hate relationship with this character. As the Punisher made a debut appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man number 129, and this would be his famous icon, and the character would go on to live in Marvel infamy. As the Punisher was assigned to be a hitman for the Jackal to try to take down Spider-Man and be a character that goes after superheroes, same to Deathstroke from the DC Universe. As even Gary Conway admits that was not his intention for the character, and he didn't know what else to do with the character throughout the history of the comic books, especially for being a writer of Spider-Man at the time, so we go to Stan Lee and John Romita. But Conway wanted to make the Punisher sympathetic, and I think in his own unique way that he kind of done that long before we got the origin behind the Punisher. As I said, Gary Conway would go to the talents of Stan Lee and the legendary John Romita Sr., and he told the two about his idea, and John Romita was the one that drew the concept for the character that would become the Punisher. And John Romita first drew the character, and he came up with some ideas that Stan Lee was not too crazy about. The Grim Reaper or the Executioner. Even one name that was chosen would be the Terminator. One name that would go over to the DC universe for Deathstroke the Terminator, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez on the pages of the New Teen Titans. The Punisher has a very dark origin. He and his family were out on a picnic, but they happened to see a mob execution right in front of them, and unfortunately, Frank's family was sadly gunned down, but Frank Castle was left alive. As this origin would suddenly launch the Punisher to become an angel of vengeance and slaughter those who decide to do the same fate to other families out there, the same that his family unfortunately suffered. And it's also obvious that the Punisher movie is inspired by a lot of the comic books written by the great Garth Ennis, who's also mostly known for creating The Boys, but Garth Ennis first got his legendary run writing a legendary run of the Punisher, which is by far one of the most graphic and gory runs of the Punisher at the time. But if you want more obscure, and there are people who have talked about the movie, there is a 1980, well, it came out in the 80s film with Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher. If I can track that DVD down, I would review it myself and see how it's different. But a lot of people said it's like one of the weirdest Punisher films they ever seen. I beg to differ for the moment because I think that this one is. Even though I really like the movie, I'm still going to give you guys the benefit of the doubt and talk about this film 20 years later with what I liked about it and what I hated about it, also giving you guys the best synopsis that I can over the Punisher film. So let's talk about Tom Jane and John Travolta's The Punisher, and see if this film still holds up 20 years later, even though it's the most unrecognized Marvel film. There's maybe a good reason that I can think of why that is. So let's talk about The Punisher. I'll be the first guy to admit it. I don't like the way how The Punisher opens up, with Frank Castle doing an inside job to try to track down on an illegal arms dealing. Which, by accident, The Punisher assassinated Bobby Saint, the son of Howard Saint, one of the biggest mobsters in Miami, Florida, not New York. Unlike DC Comics, where the cities are kind of based after cities around America, just kind of revamped and revitalized, Marvel always has saw the Marvel Universe being in New York, and that's mostly because Stan Lee is a New York native, even having the New York accent and the New York voice. An infamous and very sexy voice, mind you. But, as it would turn out, when this film was in Miami, which I didn't know until I rewatched it to do this review, I suddenly went, this is the Marvel Universe where everything is set in New York City. And the Punisher, they decide to go to Miami. In the comics, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not the biggest Punisher fan, and if there is one watching this, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But the Punisher mostly is assigned to New York, but not unless there is like a criminal that he's going after that moved to a different location, like Miami, Florida, or Chicago, or somewhere else. I'm just saying that the Marvel Universe is mostly based in New York City, like Avengers Tower, the Baxter Building, and even the Daily Bugle. So the Punisher just so happened to work in Miami, Florida. I'm just wondering why the film choice decided to do so. And I kind of don't like the way that this is introduced, and I'm going to get into the weaker Punisher origin in just a bit here, but it really didn't feel like that it had the certain punch to be a Punisher film when the first thing that happened is an accidental shooting that ended up getting Robert Saint, aka Bobby, in the film, killed, and this launched for Howard Saint to become the villain of the movie. But there is a strange twist of fate into how Frank Castle's family was brutally gunned down. It's very weird, but I will get into it in just a bit. But I just wanted to talk about that. The opening of the movie, it's very confusing. I would have liked it more if it was just him getting people arrested, and then instead of the accidental shooting, that it wasn't the Punisher that killed him, but instead, like, an officer that saw that, hey, the guy's gonna shoot Frank, so I'm gonna shoot him. And then the Punisher accidentally gets blamed. The problem is that this is technically what happened. The cops gunned down Robert, and Frank Castle still got the blame because he was the guy behind the scene. I do like the comic book origin, though. A family just so happened to accidentally witness a mob execution, so the mob freaking out, going, "We have witnesses," brutally gunned down Frank Castle's wife, son, and daughter. And this origin for the movie, even I can't make good even if I tried. They really should have used the comic book origin, which I know that, yeah, the movies can change things up a little bit, but the comic book origin, the live action, would have worked and people would have been more sympathetic toward Tom Jane Punisher character, which I'll talk more about Tom Jane Punisher toward the end of this review. But let's go back to the movie and talk more about what happens. Very similar to the comic books, Frank Castle is an FBI agent and he ends up working with the Federal Bureau and hunting down criminals. Also, John Travolta as Howard Saint, my god, he is a master in his class at being a villain, as he pulled it off so nicely and even so wonderfully. As you wouldn't think for a comedic actor like John Travolta to pull off this sympathetic role and also serious role, but he does so well and he is the greatest in this movie. And it's amazing to believe, but trust me when I say that John Travolta never goes over the top in this film and is the most greatest villain ever put to theater screen. So how do I feel about Tom Jane as the Punisher? I will admit he's not the greatest Punisher in the entire world, as he's kind of my least favorite. As in the movie, it's not Howard that said that the Punisher needs to die and goes after him. Instead, it's his wife, Olivia, who said that his family had to die.
Have your chance. He's leaving for England next week, and he's at a family reunion in Puerto Rico. I think you should.
His family.
So yeah, at a family reunion with Frank and his family, his daughter was not included in this film. Supposedly his wife wanted to get pregnant again to have another child, so that might be the inkling. As at a family reunion, his entire family gets assassinated because Olivia, Howard's wife, wanted his family to be dead. As very similar to the comic book, the Punisher lived to exact revenge against those that did him wrong, which is very similar to the comic book, but the origin is so much weaker. Trust me when I say that the comic book origin, the accidental mob execution, is the best origin behind the Punisher, as it is the one that can really give him the most sympathy. Something that the sequel to this Punisher, the Punisher Warzone, is a lot better in that regard. Maybe it's not the sequel, maybe it's a different Punisher film, but it's by far the best. And again, I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but it's just that the Punisher's origin for the mob execution just works so well for the character and really makes him all the more sympathetic. You know that what he's doing is illegal, but at the same time, you just get that little bit of satisfaction of the Punisher killing the guys that killed his family. And thus he swore to become basically an angel of vengeance and going after those that would probably do the same exact thing. Tom Jane Punisher doesn't have the same punch as basically Ray Stevenson, as Tom Jane is just the weakest Punisher in my opinion, because in order for him to get started on his journey, he doesn't exactly do so. And also, the Punisher is not as violent as he is in the comic book, not at least until the final act of the movie. Not even his family getting assassinated is even that violent or bloody. You don't even see that much bloodshed within the first hour of the film. And this is basically like a 90-minute film. So the last act, like the 30-minute mark, is when everything happens. And that's the weakest part of the bunch. Although it does have one really pretty funny fucking torture scene that ends up happening to Mickey. It is ideally the funniest scene in the movie, and I love it. Popsicle torture. That is evil, but also pretty fucking awesome. One thing I will give this movie credit for is the inclusion of the character Joan, who definitely becomes the angel on the shoulders of Frank Castle, while the Punisher is the devil on the other side. The final act of the movie is definitely the highlight, with Frank just gunning down the entire Saint organization and taking out Howard Saint for the final time after he made Howard Saint assassinate and kill his family and friends. So, is the Punisher still hold up to this day, 20 years afterwards? Sort of. It is a good film to be exact, and also my mistake. It is a 2 hour long film, not a 90-minute film. My apologies. But the action doesn't really kick off until like the last 20 minutes of the film, 20 to 30 minute tops. And it really drags the film down. There is not much violence, and for the lack of thereof that comes at the last 30 to 20 minutes. This is a film that's rated R and will give you more of the feeling that it's rated PG 13. Even earlier in the film, when Frank Castle and his father sees his mother gunned down, there is no blood. It acts like a 1940s or 1950s film where we can't show the gore, so we have to censor that. And it feels weird for a film that is The Punisher. Maybe Marvel was being too iffy about this because even Marvel, for example, Venom Let There Be Carnage was supposed to be rated R. Marvel stepped in and went, yeah, we should make that PG 13. So this film, and by the way, it's still rated R. So did something happen behind the scenes that made it not so R-rated? Because the final act is mostly rated R. If you want a good Punisher film that even includes a good origin, I'd recommend Ray Stevenson's Punisher Warzone that came out 4 years later in 2008. Maybe in 2028 I'll do this 20 years later. But as it stands, The Punisher is a good and bad film. It's decent enough, and also, no, Tom Jane is not my favorite Punisher. He can pull off the look and he can pull off the costume, but that's about it. He doesn't carry the same punch from the comic book that Frank Castle had for going after the bad guy. And even though he plays an older, down on his luck, and kind of retired Punisher, Ray Stevenson, for right now until I see John Bernsaw, Ray Stevenson is still my favorite Punisher. Tom Jane, for right now, is the least favorite. And no, I haven't seen the Netflix Punisher series. I know that I have to do that at some point. So my Funko Pop rating of the Punisher is a little bit of an iffy one to decide upon. There's good and there's also bad in it. So that is why my Funko Pop rating of the Punisher is going to be an Etrigan the Demon. There is both good and bad in the film, but there is mostly good that comes out of it. It does have a unappealing look at first, but if you can be patient and wait for the film to really kick off, I think that you'll enjoy it for what it is. But if you want an even better Punisher film, again, you want to check out Punisher Warzone. And maybe at some point, if maybe in 2028 or maybe next year, I will review this film. But for right now, The Punisher 2004, 20 years later, deserves my Funko Pop rating of an Etrigan the Demon. The Punisher was even lucky enough to team up with heavy metal or hard rock band group Drowning Pool, who performed the song Step Up, and even included the Punisher clips in the music video of Step Up. I did not include it because it is the ending song of this movie, and I did not really want this video to get a copyright strike, so that's why I used the main theme performed by Carlos Solado, who really does some pretty good music for The Punisher, including The Punisher score and theme. So there you go. And The Punisher Warzone has a lot more hard rock and heavy metal involved in it, including the song Warzone performed by Rob Zombie, which is that movie's ending song. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me at Twitter with the link in the description below. And tell me if you have seen The Punisher 2004, what you think about it. And also, if you have unfortunately seen The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below, and feel inclined to tell me who your favorite Punisher is at the moment. Is it Tom Jane? Is it Dolph Lundgren for some reason? Is it Ray Stevenson or is it John Bernsaw? Let me know in the comments down below. But I still recommend checking out The Punisher. It's a decent Marvel film. It's not the greatest Marvel film, I would say, but at least one that you can still enjoy, even if you are ever bored or it's a rainy day outside and you have nothing else better to do. So thank you guys so much for watching. I've Lazy Universe, I've White Nerdy, keep eking on. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching a Lazy Universe movie review. Be sure to subscribe to help me with the YouTube algorithm right now. And thank you so much for watching, and until next time.